Binary Domain. It's a third-person cover-based shooter with squad mechanics. Don't click off yet, it's not boring. It's a third-person shooter by Sega's Yakuza team, and the fact that it's really enjoyable makes me very confused about Dead Souls, which I just couldn't get into. Of the third-person shooters I've reviewed, they've never been very good, and it's actually a genre I quite enjoy. Thing is, Binary Domain doesn't really do anything that unique, but it does the basics right and manages to keep things fun for its 8-hour length, and even stayed fun for a second playthrough, where I made a shot for the best ending. Binary Domain takes place in the distant time of the future, and much like our future, Earth has gotten a bit shit. Merry Christmas, by the way. Global warming has caused a massive rise in sea levels alongside a massive drop in human levels. Humanity has therefore had to build upwards, and since a fair few of us were busy drowning, robots have become the staple of our workforce. The robot game is led by two companies, the American company Bergen and the Japanese Armada. With this newfound dependence on robots, the Geneva Convention has been updated to the New Geneva Convention, banning amongst other things robots that can pass for humans. Armada's full of cheeky buggers, however, because they've been knocking out Hollow Children, robots that not only pass for humans, but actually believe themselves to be humans. Often not dealing with the reveal too well, both because, well, they're actually robots, and because half of their face is usually missing when they figure it out. I imagine it's a lot to take in. Plus, based on what these lot are saying, they have gone undiscovered for decades.
What do we know about this Hollow Child?
It was granted a green card 30 years ago under the name Dominic Berry.
So not one of them has ever had an X-ray, or went through a metal detector, or had half their face blown off. By the way, nice camera angle you got there.
If it's indistinguishable from humans, where does the machine end and life begin?
Well, this is philosophical bullshit.
See that high-ranking military official? He's one too. So, a ragtag multinational crew called the Rust Crew is sent to invade Japan and capture Yoji Yamada. Rust Crews are elite teams who operate under the IRTA. They basically knock about enforcing the Geneva Convention, killing robots merrily as they go. They're trusted enough that they're sent in small squads and have to group up within the country that they're invading. Then sneak into a corporation that makes deadly robots. These deadly robots seemingly making up the entirety of Japan's military might. Oh, and their mission control doesn't seem the least bit concerned when the whole country notices them.
Looks like a large-scale battle.
And?
Well, radio chatter indicates that the Ministry is trying to flush out the resistance.
We play as Dan the Survivor Marshal, a man who lives up to his name by virtue of not being dead yet. Starting out at the Japanese seawall with our partner Roy Big Bo Botang, who is pretty much the big boisterous comic relief. He's also a man who appears to have very little faith in Dan. We start with a tutorial where Bo makes sure his comrade is capable of firing a gun, aiming and then firing a gun, and being able to actually talk.
Understand how to use your radio now? Can't hear you. Yo, I was wondering, what are your plans after this is all done? You're a bit of a player. Vacation? Chicks? Tropics?
Blitz. 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 Blitz.
What'd you say?
Considering the game's voice recognition feature is a bit of a shambles, Dan fails at basic speech. No.
It ain't that hard.
You can turn off the voice recognition feature and just use buttons, but then you lose a surprisingly long list of recognized words, and lose the ability to tell Bo you love him. Love you.
Jump the scrap heads, yo! We'll talk later!
Seriously though, the voice recognition feature is such a waste of time. Even after calibrating it, it refuses to work for me near enough all of the time. And losing that long list of commands doesn't really hinder you in any way, so at most you're losing a novelty. It's not very long at all before you're fighting robots and failing to fight a giant robot.
That's all I needed to hear. Run!
But we get him off our back long enough to have the game's one stealth segment as we swim our way into Japan. We start off in the abandoned lower city, making our way through security bots on our way to group up with the rest of the crew, and before too long we stumble into them. Our squad now has Charlie, the deadpan by the books British bloke.
It's Commander Charles Gregory to you, thanks.
Faye, a cold Chinese sniper, and Rachel, who's also British, I suppose. And doesn't really do much besides be British and shoot things. We're still at the start of our journey, still more than 7 hours left to wreck Tokyo's shit. Like I said, Binary Domain doesn't do anything really that new when compared to other third-person shooters, save for having more boss fights and quick-time events. The game controls fine, it has sticky cover that occasionally can get you into trouble, a problem not exclusive to Binary Domain by any stretch. Dan's moveset is pretty basic. He can dodge roll, he can take cover, he can melee robots, and he can yell commands.
Later, yo!
The amount of punishment Dan can take feels too just right on normal mode. It's enough to punish recklessness, but it means you can get away with playing aggressively, and it keeps the pace of the gunfights flowing nicely. Plus, you don't die straight away. Both you and your allies have medkits, 3 each without upgrades. If you have a medkit on hand, you and your allies will just be downed and can be revived. Due to this, the game can be a little easy on normal mode, because you're very rarely just given a game over. Not to mention, more medkits are plentiful, so you'll rarely run low. Plus, there is no punishment for getting downed repeatedly in a short span of time. Your allies will drop everything they're doing to make sure you're revived, and they're actually quite dependable in that regard, so the game can feel a little easy. Dan can carry 3 guns and a grenade. He's always stuck with his signature rifle, which has a special bosonic charge move, which is fun, but it feels a little token. The game never really goes into why this ability is exclusive to Dan. Its existence in gameplay is justified because occasionally barrels block your path. A slot for handguns, of which there are 2, and 1 extra weapon slot for whatever you can get your hands on. All of the weapons in the game, save for the enemy assault rifle, are fun to use. The second tier shotgun in particular just tears through enemies and is a blast to use. It's a standard arsenal of assault rifles, submachine gun, shotguns, sniper rifles, and a rocket launcher, but thanks to good level design, all of them are pretty much viable weapons throughout, so you can change weapons up based on your playstyle, and you'll never really feel too disadvantaged. The weapons also feel pretty weighty thanks to the limb damage system. Shooting limbs off of enemies has various effects. Leg shots immobilize, arm shots make enemies drop their weapons, and
Never surrender!
best of all, headshots cause infight. That is way more interesting than a boring old instant kill. Plus the ping that accompanies a headshot is always satisfying. Those credits I mentioned go to the Japanese ammo transit system. This ammo transit system works on a backwards system of magic that rewards killing the very robots that defend the country. This transit system moves guns, ammo, medkits, weapon upgrades, and nanomachines anywhere in the country, including to the back of a speeding van. And if this system isn't whimsical enough, it has a little roulette minigame where you can win more bullets or a medkit. This does introduce some really lightweight RPG mechanics. Nanomachines give you small boosts to damage resistance, health and melee damage amongst other things. You can get through the game without touching this stuff at all. You can also upgrade the signature weapon of each character. Dan's assault rifle becomes more akin to an LMG as the game goes on. The gunfights tend to be large. The game does not skimp on the enemy count, and at times you're dropped into huge frays. Unlike a certain other game that does large gunfights and gets dull, this game pulls it off, because the enemies also get tougher as the game goes on. Plus there are more enemies than just man with gun and slightly bigger gunmen. Here we've got robot crabs, robot cops who try and jump smack you, giant motherfuckers with Gatling guns, and much more. And also, it's a squad shooter, so you have squad mates. Bizarrely enough for this genre, your allies are fucking capable. They will kill enemies, they will pick you up when you're knocked down, most of the time they'll obey commands. They are AI allies in a third-person shooter that can actually kill stuff. And even more bizarrely, for this playthrough, I would have preferred that they were useless. Let me explain. Binary Domain has multiple endings. What ending you get is based on the trust level you have with your allies. The best ending's not just handed to you. There are 7 total squad mates in the game, 2 of which are cameo squad mates who you only have for a very limited time, one of those 2 only joining for 1 segment. In order to get the best ending, you need to max out all of those trust meters, even though 2 of those people are not even present when the ending happens. Certain allies are also not available at some points in the game, and for a majority of the game your max squad size is a whopping 2 people. Plus you can only change squad members at prescribed points, so you need to know who you'll have and when, and plan accordingly. When I max out someone's trust, they're just dropped from the team, never to be used again. They're now useless to me. If you're playing in hopes of getting the best ending, you can't just take squad members based on who you enjoy the most. Worrying about this stuff only really detracted from the game, so I wouldn't bother with it again. Building trust is based mainly on killing robots very quickly.
Absolutely brilliant, son!
Problem is that your allies don't actually want to like you. For all that I praised their actual utility a moment ago, they will gladly run around like headless chickens, hoping to take gunfire so that they have something to blame you for. I need to kill robots so that you ingrates will like me. If they kill robots, they won't become dependent on me. So, I never upgrade their guns. I spend it all on myself. And I am really happy when they're downed. I gleefully sprint over to revive them so that they will associate me with continued existence. This system made my playstyle more aggressive. I had to beat my team to the rumble so they wouldn't get any kills. I would charge ahead and try to wipe out every enemy before they had the chance to do anything. And they would praise me for it. About 3 points in the game, there are small areas where you can wander around and talk to allies and locals to gain some extra trust, and a little bit of world building. These segments are quite sparse and only serve to act as a breather in the otherwise non-stop action. Only one of these segments has a unique vendor. Luckily enough, he's the vendor who sells trust-building nanomachines. The addition is small, but might just be enough. Plus the added trust you build from dialogue with your squad mates is pittance. I'd also like to add that this is the most nothing dialogue system ever produced. I like to imagine Dan responding to teammates with complete disinterest based on these options. It's just agreeing with them, not asking any follow-up questions, just mindlessly agreeing or disagreeing. The trust system for the best ending feels like a token effort. It also supposedly makes allies follow orders more closely, but they do pretty well even without you bossing them around. I occasionally told them to hang back, but it didn't make too much difference. It's a little bit beautiful and a little bit backward that the best way to get the best ending in this cover-based game is to play a jackass who charges everything with no regard for personal safety, or regard for his troops. This does wonders for team trust. Be an aggressive loner yes-man. Fortunately enough, it's also the most enjoyable way to play. I'm going to go back to talking about the story now and pretty much spoiling everything. If you don't want that, this is where I'd start. The team had just got together, and the first port of call is to get to Mifune, an old Yakuza crook who has promised passage into the upper city. On the way over to him, through the abandoned streets of Old Tokyo, we have a rematch with the first boss, and before too long have our first QuickTime event. And our second boss fight with a giant robot spider. There are roughly the same number of boss fights and QuickTime events throughout the game. I'm noting that again because it deserves it. Not all of them are fun, but they keep things interesting throughout. After taking down the robot spider, we find the slums.
The smart one.
We promise to go and talk with Mifune immediately.
Dan, wait!
Then Charlie sees something more interesting. We spend 10 minutes watching a hollow child have an identity crisis. Then Dan shoots him. Then he shoots himself. We talk with Mifune for about 5 minutes, and Charlie's angry that the plan to get into the upper city is not boring.
The subway station under this building closed when Old Tokyo flooded.
Jumped up prick. Really had a laugh back there, didn't he?
Stiff upper lip, old boy. Pip pip.
Then more robots turn up. We fight our way back out of the slums and jet ski our way to the upper city sewer system. Sadly, these are the slowest and clunkiest jet skis going, but what can you expect from a slumlord? What's that? Another boss fight 20 minutes after the last? Granted, this can be one of the more annoying boss fights, particularly your first time around. It's a bit like the Harrier fight from Metal Gear Solid 2, yeah? But imagine if every time you got knocked down you dropped the Stinger missile, and you only have 2 shots, and you need to actually physically hold the Stinger in your hands to get more ammo. And the Harrier was actually a VTOL that sent robot drones to block your shots. It can be a little bit annoying. Plus the size of the arena makes me think this area originally had more to it, because you will not use half of it during the fight. After that, we fight our way up through the sewers and its horde of robot monkeys, up into the much nicer upper city. What do you think of the wealth disparity, Rachel?
Wherever you go in the world, you always find the poor driven out and marginalized.
Grand.
Robots
Cheers
are
for the
free to go
trust.
about as they please.
We get to scare the locals a little bit before the French crew arrives to finish the job and send them running.
I guess that's them right now.
Christ, am I the only one who understands the word covert?
We quickly catch up to the French crew, and it turns into a rail shooter segment. It's a bit lengthy, but luckily it's the least shit rail shooter seen in my reviews yet. I can actually aim and my cursor doesn't go bloody mental when the car swerves. Plus I can take cover to get my bearings. This is also where we meet Kane, my favourite party member, and who I've spoiled by showing repeatedly in the gameplay segment of this review. But that's where all the best footage was from, so, you know.
Increasing speed.
A snarky French robot who pretty much gets all the best lines in the game.
Kane, you picking anything up?
Oui, monsieur. The need to duck.
It seems that the French produce the best robots because in cutscenes Kane beasts it. In gameplay, not so much.
The vector does not seem to go in our favor!
Also, Dan is set up with having a distrust of robots as part of his backstory, but this really goes nowhere. He seems to trust Kane right off the bat. Good on him, getting over his issues. The rail shooter segment ends with the one remaining human member of the French Rust crew dead, but it's alright, we have a net gain of Kane. These 5 people and 1 robot make up Beetle Team. Also, Beetle Team is being followed by a single police detective and his rookie. This is Kurosawa, the most persistent and powerful man in the universe. Just after the rail shooter segment, the team splits up and heads into a food processing plant. We get a pretty cool introduction to the next tier of enemies.
This is a warning. Put down your weapons and surrender. Repeating warning. Put down your weapons and surrender.
It would appear we have been detected by security robots.
You have failed to comply with the warning. Initiating intruder suppression program.
And then have a conveyor ride through a factory line. Get thrown into a room full of ozone and have to quickly sort it out. Finally, fight our way to the roof. Oh, and by the way, Kane has a grappling hook. Our attempt at escape only somewhat works thanks to Kurosawa. And the team is now split. Now Bo, Rachel and Charlie will be gone until very late in the game, so I hope you've been building trust. Also, Kane can fucking fly.
Save the girl, right?
She is much prettier than you, monsieur.
Luckily we can hitch a ride on this train. I've got no idea where the passengers actually go, they probably found an ammo transit and walked out. This train ride culminates in us fighting a giant robot gorilla through a train station. He can be a bit of a pain, but Dan takes a giant metal fist to the face pretty well. Just needs a needle to the gut and he's good to go.
Please be careful.
We managed to put down the gorilla, and Mifune has sent some rebels to chuck flares at it.
I don't know about this.
We managed to outrun the robots for all of 5 seconds. Then they catch up again and basically chase after us to the rebel hideout. What follows is the second half of the gorilla fight. It begins with a rather long defense set piece which kills the pace. The rebels throw every explosive they have at the gorilla, and you have to watch it slowly trundle through them. It's a slog on repeat playthroughs because unlike the rest of the game you're not actually under much threat, and there's no way to speed up progress. The actual boss fight is about trying to then lure the gorilla out in front of a heavy machine gun, which you also have to manually load. The gorilla is probably my least favourite boss in the game. He can get you into chains of just being repeatedly knocked over and just isn't much fun to fight. The only time you get breathing room against the guy is when he decides to wreck your party members for a moment. At the rebel base, Dan and Faye fall for each other, which is interesting in my case because they've shared about 4 sentences and one less than comfortable train ride. This is where we meet Shindo, the leader of the rebellion. Mid-chat we realise that robots built by Amada can be remotely controlled, including Hollow Children. With that in mind, a crane attacks us. A goddamn crane is a boss fight. The team and Shindo jump in a van and book it for Amada. It's time for another rail shooter segment, and alongside that, another boss. The boss that accompanies it is probably the easiest boss in the game, but makes up for it with style. And the fact that its name is the fucking Tsar Runner. It's a giant motorbike with a robot attached. This boss fight is more about whittling it down between shooting down missile barrages. It's a fun, if pretty simple boss. We crash outside Amada Corp, and have to nick one of their robots to defend ourselves and blow the gate. This is the second section that I dislike. The robot turns slowly, has to reload, again very slowly, and he only has several shots before reloading. The only way I can comfortably complete this section is to just bunker in a corner and slowly blow away waves of enemies. It's just a bit of a pace breaker for an entirely unfun gimmick, and it goes for about 10 minutes as well. Eventually someone suggests blowing up the gates, and with that we're in Amada, and the game will make up for that bit of boredom in real short order. Cut to Kurosawa. He's having doubts about busting into Amada to continue the chase, knowing it would cost him. Luckily, the rookie is there with a rousing speech about losing your job. And with that, he heads on in. Cut to the team, and now we've got new enemies to deal with. Robot ninjas. Who, well, all things considered, aren't actually that threatening. Unless they just get in a loop of spin attacking you, in which case they're absolute bastards. Then we get to the foyer, and our next boss fight turns up. It's a fucking chandelier. We scale the bugger to get to its weak point. And honestly, again, this is one of the easier boss fights, but it's an enjoyable and bizarre set piece nonetheless. With the Decor defeated, we begin our search for the Hollow Children lab. I've been rambling about story events for a while now, but this is why the game remains fun. The basics are all in place and they work pretty well on their own, but you're rarely in one place for too long. The game is a constant stream of set pieces and boss fights. And, well, set pieces aren't just quick-time events. The boss fights are a little bit bullet spongy, and most of them either depend on missile barrages or just plain ramming into you, both of which knock you down. And if they feel like spamming those moves over and over again, the fights can feel a little sluggish. But they are genuinely enjoyable fights. Their designs are imaginative, and they're dropped into the game just often enough that it keeps things interesting. Whilst they are bullet sponges, you will not spend long guessing if you're actually doing damage against them. They clearly take hits, they flinch, and they're all susceptible to the Bosonic Charge move. I really like the boss fights in this game, and there are a lot of them. The cutscenes are generally kept short and sweet, with a few exceptions here and there, and the tone is generally light.
Don't panic, folks. We're here just inspecting the emergency escape route. All okay?
Yes. Sure, everything checks out.
Outstanding.
The game has a sense of humour and it doesn't take itself too seriously. The enemy variety is decent and new types of enemies are slowly introduced so you're not just shooting the same stock model for the entire duration. Also, sniper enemies that are not completely annoying. That's a rare feat. After some thorough investigation, Kurosawa catches up with us, and suddenly Dan has the intelligence of a Yakuza character when he has to deal with an armed human.
Now drop your weapons.
Any bright ideas?
I was hoping you had a plan.
Shall I self-destruct, monsieur?
Kane, you've got a lousy sense of humor.
Amada capitalizes on Dan's confusion, turns up, takes control of every robot present, including Kane.
Bonsoir, monsieur.
And we're dumped into the most cathartic section of the game with Shindo and Kurosawa. Faye and Kane are nowhere to be seen. These are the failed Hollow Children, and this is also the only section we have Kurosawa, so I have to show him why you trust Dan to survive a marshal. Honestly, this section tries to have a horror vibe. You're being attacked by zombie robots who still have chunks of skin attached, but you plow through them so easily, and the defense section where you just have an open hallway to gun them down, it just makes this section a blast. We get to the lift leading out of the dump, but Shindo is hallucinating his dead mate's face, so he stays behind to die in battle. I honestly thought this was based on trust the first time around, but nope, no matter what, he's out of here. Once upstairs, Kurosawa proves he's the most powerful man in existence.
Wait, I think there might be a way out. Looks like I was right. Let's move.
And then he leaves the story, his point proven. Plus, Bo, Rachel, and Charlie are back. The crew at this point has the evidence they need on Amada, so actually capturing him has been forgotten about. Plus, the US is going to be invading in give or take 12 hours, so they sort of want to get out of Dodge. But Dan refuses to leave without Faye. We're about to get a nice twist related to her, but Amada has also hacked into a bunch of shit and is launching nukes at the building, so that's more important.
They're broadcasting a counterfeit satellite signal to maintain.
We've got to ignore those juicy details for now and race against a very lenient time limit to the roof. The Cerberus spot on the roof feels like a mini-boss after all the other shit we've faced. Satellite is blown, so the nukes are a non-issue for now. But this entire section of roof is collapsing, so we book it to another tower.
I got you. Stick with me, son. You'll be the survivor for a long time.
Don't give yourself too much credit. Need to work out more. No.
So, nukes averted for the moment. What's the twist? Faye's a hollow child? Nope, it's not that. This twist still isn't quite on the level of Yakuza 4's never-ending stream of betrayals at the end, but Yakuza teams still like to be twisty buggers. Faye isn't a hollow child. No, she's the daughter of one. Female hollow children can have children. Here, look at this diagram. Also, the US government wants all these hybrids dead. Dan is the only one who questions this whatsoever. The rest of the Rust crew just kind of take it in stride. In fact, they're all for it.
Her mama was a scraphead. That makes Faye a scraphead, and you a scrap lover.
You say that again. Say it again, damn it.
Now, we're right near the ending. Like, a hop and a skip away. Rachel's trust ain't at max level yet, so I've got to go fucking apeshit over these robots interrupting our exposition. We arrive at a coffin, and inside is Yoji Amada.
Yoji Amada.
We find out that all along the Amada we've been after is actually an AI impersonating Amada. The AI went rogue when the real Amada was going to expose his existence as a fuck you to the New Geneva Convention. He instead killed Amada and managed to get a grave thrown together for him inside his own offices because, well, this AI Amada is a bit ballsy. Then we get to the reasoning behind the Hollow Children. Now, the idea of them acting as spies is not an insane plot, but this is an insane plot. He wanted them to have children and integrate into human society long term. The kids of Hollow Children cannot be controlled, by the by. It's just that this AI remote controlling a robot body capable of actually aging is playing the long game. Then Faye arrives for the penultimate boss fight. I spend most of it trying to get Rachel incapped so I can repeatedly revive her, just like any commander worth his salt. I just barely make it. The fight with Faye is pretty bland, all things considered. It uses the dialogue system for a tiny back and forth between Dan and Faye, but it has no bearing on what's actually happening. It would have been more interesting if this was just a battle against waves of robots while you try and talk the team down. But as it is, just shoot Faye in the face until it's over.
I'm sorry.
Dan fakes out the rest of the team, and they don't have time to check if Faye was actually shot in the face because, well, the Amada AI's brain is smack bang in the next room over. We're about to destroy it when Mission Control drops in, because an immobile brain wouldn't be an interesting enough final boss.
US invasion isn't for another 12 hours.
Sorry, Charlie, but I can't let you destroy this AI. It's US property now.
Besides, he's a pretty shit bloke as well. He wants to nick the brain for his own ends, and also incriminate Beetle Team in the process. Also, Bo was going to go along with his plan,
That's the way it has to be.
but he saw how good Dan was at shooting robots, so he triple crosses back over. Faye's trick death lasts for all of 2 minutes, and because I just barely got max trust, Kane drops in for the finale. If you don't get the best ending, Kane is just dropped from the plot and he's never brought up again. Depending on trust levels, Rachel or Bo can take a punch meant for Faye and they die. In the best ending, however, Kane takes the hit.
Are you hurt, mademoiselle?
No, thanks.
And well, he's Kane.
This is what it feels like to have your job taken by a scraphead.
The final boss is actually a little underwhelming when compared to some of the other bosses. I do like that the design for the American mechs is very clear and distinct from the Amada robots we've been up against the whole game, but from a gameplay perspective, he isn't a real jump up in difficulty. He cycles through several forms, but none of them also progress in difficulty. It does feel suitably climactic, however, because you're fighting alongside your whole squad. This is something I don't think I've ever seen in another shooter. A big finale where you have everyone working alongside you. It does feel like a suitable reward for maxing out trust, and it's got more payoff to me than any of the other changes in the story. The story ends with us defeating Mission Control. He's a bit of a sore loser, however, so he calls in a nuke. just when it should be killing us all.
One. Strike! Damn it! Strike!
See? I told you there was no missile.
We learned that the Armada AI hacking into the nuclear launch program has pretty much given it free will, so it rejects the command. This concept is frankly horrifying. Plus, I have never seen a man so disappointed to have not been hit with a nuke. Charlie decides to let Faye live, giving her a few hours head start before he tells his superiors that she's gone. Faye goes into hiding, but Dan tracks her down. As for the US, they're still trying to track her down, scared that she'll become a leader figure to the Hollow Children. And this is a sequel hook I kind of doubt we'll ever see followed up on.
I get a feeling this is not the end.
That's Binary Domain. I had an unexpected amount of fun with it. It is a good example of cover-based shooting. The shooting is solid, the enemies are enjoyable to fight, the limb damage system perfectly rewards good play, and headshots causing infighting is way more enjoyable than just instant kills. The pacing of the game, helped by the constant string of boss fights and set pieces, means it is rarely ever dull. It is a game that only takes 3 very brief breathers. It managed to hold my attention for 2 playthroughs. It's not all good, however. The dialogue system feels very tacked on, the small aid to the trust system, which in itself I'm not a huge fan of. Even with some forethought, I completely lucked out at the end to get the best ending. I repeated the final corridor of robots repeatedly because it feels random when teammates decide to trust you more based on how well you destroy robots. I basically had to game the system for points. The OK ending is only slightly less satisfying as a payoff, however, so I would say not to worry about the trust system and just enjoy the ride. Plus, I've mentioned that 2 segments are drags, but that's it. The good really does outweigh the bad, and I would really recommend Binary Domain if you have even a slight interest in third-person shooters.